I said we were going to go back to back.
It was ugly to say the least, and let's make a long story short here. TCU doesn't belong on the same field as a team like Georgia, Alabama, or Ohio State. That's the difference in the ball game last night, and you saw it firsthand. Well, that happened. And just like your boy Miko Hardman Jr., by the way, he played for Georgia, tweeted out, that's why you put Alabama in the playoffs, LOL, so we can have an interesting game. But hey, don't worry, I'm not one of these delusional Alabama fans, but just remember that tweet. We'll talk about that a little later in this video. In today's video, I'm just cutting straight to the point. We got one topic and one topic only. We're here to talk about how Georgia, yes, the Georgia Bulldogs, exposed TCU. And I got a feeling a lot of people are going to enjoy watching this video because all throughout the season, a majority, over half of the college football fans, have stated that TCU is fraudulent. Most people didn't feel like TCU is on the level of an Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, or the big dogs, and last night they proved they wasn't. What was the conversation for the past couple of months? Well, yes, TCU, they deserve to be in the playoff, but do they really belong in the playoff? Are they one of the best four teams? Me personally, I've already told you guys how I feel about it, but we're going to address it again and see where we was right and also see where we was wrong. We've got a lot to talk about and go over. If you're new to the channel, you know what to do. Consider subscribing, all that corny blah 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 YouTuber stuff. All right, blah blah blah. Shut your crap up, Matt. Now without further ado, let's get into it. First things first, let's get this out the way. I'm not even going to talk about the game so much because there is nothing to say. Let's keep it short and sweet. Georgia flat out dominated. They eviscerated TCU. I told you guys heading into the matchup, I believe my prediction was Georgia was going to win soundly 42-24, and I also said you're more than likely going to see the difference from a team with a bunch of 4- and 5-star recruits and a team with a bunch of 2- and 3-star recruits. And yeah, that's what happened. It's not so much that TCU didn't go out there and play hard. I think they gave it their best shot. It just wasn't enough. Georgia's that great. There's levels to college football, and I've came up with my own ranking system this year, and I've told you guys this time after time. You got your terrible teams, your slightly above terrible but not average teams, your average teams, your slightly above average teams, your good teams, your really good teams, your great teams, and your elite teams. All throughout this year, I've believed there's only been one team in that elite category, and that's been Georgia. As far as it goes for your great category, I have none in there, but my really good teams, that's where I would throw TCU. You could maybe sneak Tennessee in there before Hendon Hooker got hurt. You could also throw Ohio State and Michigan in there. And for Alabama, this may rub some Bama fans the wrong way, but I don't even have them in the really good category. I just got them in the good one. The reason for that is because Alabama looked terrible and embarrassing numerous times throughout this season. As easily as Alabama could have been 12-0, they also could have been something like 7-5. They got lucky a lot of times. Here's what I need to address. I see all these people saying, man, TCU's awful. They shouldn't even be on the same field as Georgia. How did we let them into the playoff and blah, 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 blah. You know how it goes. That's all everybody's talking about, how this was a terrible matchup. However, at the same time, I see a lot of people defending it saying, hey, well, this TCU team, they beat Michigan and Michigan beat Ohio State. I said this right after the Michigan game, and I'm going to stand firm on this. Michigan threw away that game against TCU. If they played 10 times, Michigan is probably winning 9 out of 10 games. The only reason TCU beat Michigan is because, yes, they did have a good game plan, but Michigan lost it. TCU didn't win the game, Michigan lost, and there's a difference. So with that being said, does this mean Georgia would have beat Michigan in the same fashion that they beat TCU? Absolutely not. You never know. I always hate when people try to bring up these comparison and arguments where they go, oh, well, Georgia, they beat TCU really bad, so that means if TCU beat Michigan, Georgia would beat Michigan just as bad. You can't do that because different teams match up differently with different opponents. You can't play this what-if game. Same thing with Alabama losing to Tennessee, and then Tennessee lost to South Carolina by 30 points. Does that mean South Carolina would have beat Alabama by 30 points? No. You can't do that, and anybody that actually watches the games, you know this. Let me read you off this tweet because I think it's a great point. This is not the SEC beating the Big 12. Georgia is just infinitely better than anyone else. But the entire SEC will ride the best team's coattails as is tradition. I don't really agree with the last part of it because, yes, as a conference, you should be excited to have the championship coming back. It doesn't matter if the SEC just has one great team every year. That's still an accomplishment. That's a different conversation for a different day, but I want to bring this up. I made a video about 3 to 4 days ago, and it was explaining, and I talked about the false narrative about Georgia. Heading into this TCU and Georgia matchup, the false narrative that I addressed and said it wouldn't hold true is that everybody in the media is trying to say, oh, Georgia, they're feeling good about themselves. They may come into here snoozing and TCU might jump on them early. Everybody was trying to act like Georgia was not going to be prepared for this game. And I told you, no. You do not understand. Kirby Smart, he's going to somehow convince these Georgia players that they're the underdog in the game. And if you don't believe me, look on social media. All these Georgia players, when they're doing these interviews, they're acting like the media was writing them off before the season. Stetson Bennett and all these other guys are saying, yeah, well, y'all didn't believe in us, and look, we shocked y'all. When in reality, people were believing in Georgia. Maybe they didn't think they were going to go back-to-back, but they knew Georgia was going to be a top 5 team. The reason the players think this way is because Kirby Smart has engraved it into their minds that they are the underdogs. Kirby Smart is a master manipulator in a good way, which is rare. Along with Nick Saban, and I think Nick Saban is kind of losing that motivational touch because he is getting older and he can't scream all the time. Kirby Smart is up there with the best of them. When it comes to motivating players, I'd say at this current moment, he is slightly ahead of Nick Saban just because he is younger and has more energy. I want you to really think about this and let it sink in. Kirby Smart somehow, someway convinced these Georgia players that people were doubting them heading into this game. And that's why you got to give Kirby a ton of credit and respect, because that's the biggest part of being a head coach. You got to be a motivational speaker, and that's what he is. With all that being said, let's get into the real truth about TCU. I'm going to show you the final score right here. As you can see it, 65-7. It's embarrassing. There's not another way to put it. It is embarrassing. However, I would like to remind some of y'all, it doesn't matter if you lose by 1 point or 50 points, it's still a loss. I would argue and say that losing the way TCU did, it's better to lose that way because it doesn't hurt as bad. For example, you think TCU fans are hurt over this game? Absolutely not. They're like, hey, Georgia's just bigger, stronger, faster. They beat us in every aspect of the game, whereas Ohio State fans currently, they are sick to their stomach. I'll give you a great example as an Alabama fan. When Clemson beat us by, I think it was like 25 or 30 in the championship one year, that game didn't hurt as bad because we was never in it till the end. I never had false hope. Whereas whenever Alabama lost to Tennessee this season and LSU, that hurt 10 times worse. So losing the way TCU did doesn't really hurt, just something for your train of thought. Besides the score being that lopsided, let's check out TCU's entire schedule this season. I'm just going to remind y'all real quickly. TCU dominated a decent Oklahoma team that was okay at best, and after that game, that's when TCU went on that crazy run of, I think it was like 8 straight games by under 10 points. Beat Kansas by a touchdown, beat Oklahoma State in double overtime, beat Kansas State by 10 points, West Virginia by 10, Texas Tech by 10, Texas by 7, which was really a 14-point game. Barely beat Oklahoma by 1 point, killed Iowa State, lost to Kansas State, beat Michigan by 6, and then, yeah, last but not least, Georgia. I started really paying attention and keeping up with TCU right after that Oklahoma game because I knew they was at least going to win 9 or 10 games. And after that Oklahoma game, as good and as great as a regular season they had, I still don't believe they was one of the best 4 teams in the country. And here's what I mean by that, and I told you guys this months ago. If TCU and Alabama play tomorrow, I'm putting everything I own on Alabama to win that game. I'm not picking TCU. And anybody with a brain cell is in the same boat as me. You're not picking TCU to beat Alabama. Now, that's not to say the upset couldn't happen, but you're not going to pick them. Regardless of all that, TCU goes 12-0, and they lose in their conference championship in overtime to Kansas State. That game should have been eye-opening to everybody else that TCU was not one of the best 4 teams in the country. But, and I have a big but, and I told you guys this, I don't think TCU is one of the best 4 teams in the country. But I do think they deserve to be in the playoff. Because when you break it down and look at it, Alabama, they didn't deserve to be in the playoff. They had 2 regular season losses, and they almost lost 2 or 3 more games. When you looked at the entire playing field behind TCU, nobody else had a better resume. And trust me, I believe the committee wanted to put Alabama in, but you just couldn't. Alabama's best win was a 1-point road win against a backup quarterback at Texas. And I get it, a lot of people may try to bring up, well, Matt, they beat Michigan and made it to the championship game. What are you talking about? Yet again, for those people that are claiming that argument, Michigan, they played one of the worst games I've seen this season. It was bad. It felt like Michigan was trying to lose the game. That's how bad Michigan played. With all of that happening, it leads us to our current date and time where TCU lost by 60 points. I haven't even looked at the box score. Let's take a look at it. Wow, Stetson Bennett dang near had a perfect quarterback rating of 99.5, 18 for 25, 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and I also believe he had 2 on the ground. What a game for DoorDash Bennett. He played phenomenal, and I've already given him his respect in the video last night. Let's take a look at the team stats, though. TCU had 9 first downs, and Georgia had 32. Georgia had 589 total yards of offense. TCU had 188. Oh man, this really puts it into perspective. It was ugly to say the least, and let's make a long story short here. TCU doesn't belong on the same field as a team like Georgia, Alabama, or Ohio State. And you want to know why I say that and I didn't include Michigan in that conversation? Because Michigan doesn't have all these 4- and 5-star recruits like Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State have. That's the difference in the ball game last night, and you saw it firsthand. Teams like TCU cannot, and let me repeat this, they cannot compete with teams like Georgia. It didn't happen last night, and it will never happen. TCU will never beat a team like Georgia. It won't happen. It will never happen. It's the same reason why Brian Kelly left Notre Dame. Because Brian Kelly, he's a dang good head coach. He might be great when it's all said and done, but he even knew that Notre Dame, with the talent, with the players Notre Dame has, they can't compete with Alabama. It's as simple as that. That's the truth. I don't know what more you want me to tell you. I am curious, though. Let me know your thoughts down below. But